Hello and welcome to Four Wheels Good. This week's featured vehicles include the Vauxhall Vectra Estate, the Nissan Primera and a host of classic Peugeots. Mike Rutherford will also be driving the recently announced Car of the Year. But first this week, a gathering of some of the world's leading car designers, engineers and environmentalists. On the agenda, how to produce the clean car of the future.
If I started to talk to you about the ozone layer and the greenhouse effect, you could be forgiven for thinking that I'm trying out for a job on tomorrow's world. I mean, what place do words like that have on a motoring programme called Four Wheels Good? Well, unfortunately, these Four Wheels Good can sometimes be Four Wheels Bad because they have a very bad effect on the environment. There's around 500 million cars on the world's roads. Give us another 20 or 30 years and that figure's going to rise to well over 2 billion. So things aren't looking good. Now, this is a problem the motor vehicle industry is taking very seriously indeed, and it's the main reason that today we're at the Volkswagen head office at Wolfsburg in Germany. Volkswagen hold this forum every 2 years to let the public know that they're doing as much as possible about the most serious issue facing the motor industry. It sounds great, but how much importance does a manufacturer really place on it?
Environment orientation is one of our major political orientation in our company, and I think there's a lot of challenge in this area and a lot of opportunity on the market.
Do you view responsibility being in meeting legislation, or do you feel that a company like Volkswagen should be setting new standards?
No, I think legislation always puts us in a bad position out of competition. So we think there's a broad field of competition in this area, environmental features on cars, and that's the reason why we do a lot more than the officials want us to do from the legal side. Also in factory and on the car itself, of course.
The good old Volkswagen Golf, a very familiar sight. But not this one, because this is a Golf with a difference. This is the City Stromer, and it's an electric Golf. An electric Golf? I hear you all cry, how on earth does that work? Well, if you want a talking point at parties, then this is the car to own. Because all you need to do is flip open the number plate, pull out the cord, plug it in, and away you go. Well, you do when the battery's charged. In developing the City Stromer, VW have tried to take as many components as possible from the regular Golf. In fact, it's only once you open the bonnet that you actually realise how different this is. Now, this is only half of the battery. The total unit weighs around 480 kilograms. It takes around 8 to 9 hours to charge. Now, the future of the electric car really does depend upon developing a higher capacity battery so they can reduce the size of it. And this is where the other half of the battery lives, under here. They've had to do away with the spare wheel, but you've still got plenty of room for your luggage. From the exterior, you certainly can't tell the difference between the City Stromer and the regular Golf, but once you get into the car and start it, that's when the differences become obvious. The main thing is the operation of the clutch. You don't really need to use it apart from when you're actually changing gear, and you can start off in any gear you want, first, second or third, although you get a slight difference in acceleration. The big difference, however, that you can't get away from is how quiet the car is. Peaceful, wonderful. Off a fully charged battery, you'd get around 50 miles from the City Stromer, doing a regular 30 to 40 miles per hour. So, as the name suggests, it's really best suited to short journeys and for city use. At the moment here in Germany, the City Stromer isn't being sold through the dealer network. It's only available direct from Volkswagen. As a result of this, there aren't many private buyers with one. The market really seems to be as a fleet vehicle for large companies that want to be seen to be doing their bit for the environment. So is it true that this car is your baby?
Well, I wouldn't put it that way. We have developed here at Volkswagen this car, but at that time of the development I was a project manager of this car.
Why decide on the Golf? Because it is a particularly heavy car. Why not something lighter like, say, a Polo?
Well, that's a good question, but it is the philosophy of this car that we stayed with a lead-acid battery. You see, there are quite a few battery systems, and if you stay with this battery, which is well known for some time on one hand, on the other hand very heavy, and you know the restrictions to that, you need a certain size of the car to have a reasonable electric vehicle. And we thought that this was a Golf. With a Polo we would have even less range, even lower performance.
There may well be those of you watching that would like to become the proud owner of a City Strommer. Before you go dashing off to your local VW dealer, hang on just a minute. You see, you can only buy one of these if you live in Germany.
We are prepared to offer it in the UK, as far as I know at least, but I think the market for a City Strommer is not very big. We have sold in Germany about 200 cars, and yeah, we find out if there is a demand from the market. I'm quite sure that we will offer the car also in the UK.
But don't you think in a way it's up to you to create the demand? I mean, the car isn't available through dealer networks, it is not actively being promoted. Do you not feel that you need to be doing more in this area?
I think the major problem of an electric vehicle is the fact that it cannot run too far, about let's say 40-50 kilometers, depends on the power, or the way you drive the car, and then it has to be reloaded for a couple of hours. So that is one of the major disadvantages of such a car.
Of course, it's not just Volkswagen who are working with electric vehicles. BMW have recently unveiled their latest concept, the E1. Unmistakably still a BMW, the car features the traditional kidney-shaped centre grille and twin headlights, but will be available with either an internal combustion engine, an electric motor, or a hybrid that will allow the driver to switch between the combustion engine and the electric motor. On paper, the vehicle sounds and looks fantastic, but in reality, the day of mass-produced electric vehicles on the road is still a long way off. BMW have also done much work on using natural gas as a fuel. Right now, engines that run off natural gas are the most eco-friendly alternatives to petrol and diesel being produced. There's around 1 million gas vehicles on the world's road, and in some countries where gas is widely available and cheaper than petrol or diesel, they've taken quite a good market share. Would you believe there are 400,000 of them in Argentina alone? Although the potential of gas, electric and electric hybrid vehicles is clear, the technology still has a long way to go. The future really lies in producing engines that are more efficient, and that's where the manufacturers seem to be putting their money. The race is on to be the first to develop the 3-litre engine. No, not the 3-litre engine, but an engine that will give 100 kilometres to 3 litres of fuel. In other words, making it capable of, wait for it, 80 miles per gallon.
This is one of our major technology orientation, so we have done a lot during the last years in aerodynamics, engines, transmissions and lightweight building of cars. So we are quite sure that we will be able to offer a 3-liter car within the next 3 years, let's say 3 years.
So we've pinned you down to 3 years.
You can.
You can come back in 3 years and say, OK,
hopefully,
can I test it?
We would appreciate it.
In a challenge to the motor industry to speed things up, Greenpeace have already produced a 3-litre engine, adapting the Renault Twingo to produce the Twingo Smile.
It's a 2-cylinder boxer motor petrol engine with only 360 cubic centimeters and a supercharger that puts pressure waves in the engine and causes them to have a very high efficiency.
How slow is this vehicle? What is its top speed?
The speed and the other performances of this car are nearly equivalent to that of the original car.
So you're telling me you can do 90 miles an hour, 120, 130 kilometers an hour in a car that has
more, yes.
even more perhaps,
even more,
in a
yeah.
car that has only 360 cc's,
Yep.
and it will do twice as much on 1 litre of fuel than a conventional car.
That's right. And what experts tell us that this car in serial production would even have the same price or only a slightly increased price compared to the original Twingo. So Greenpeace thinks that a car, and we think that the car industry can do the same that the Swiss engineers working for us have done. So what we want the car industry to do is that they build these cars instead of the now existing cars. The Twingo is just an example, and we think that all cars could be doubled in efficiency.
Now, if Greenpeace can take the Twingo and produce the Twingo Smile, which is already capable of these figures, why is it taking manufacturers like yourselves so long to be able to do this?
Yeah, I think it's different if you make a car which main performance is to run with 3 liters per 100 kilometers. If we make an offer to the market, Volkswagen as one of the biggest car manufacturers in the world, we have to balance the differences between fuel consumption, safety, for instance, and comfort, noise and vibration, harshness and things like that. And we have to do it, this technology that we can reproduce is in a large scale in our factories. So I think that is a major challenge, and it takes a couple of years.
Of course, one of the best ways to produce a car that's more fuel efficient is to make a car that's lighter and more aerodynamic. And the new Volkswagen Passat is a great example of this. Volkswagen engineers here at Wolfsburg have created a car that's aerodynamically the best in its class. They've looked at using alternative materials, they've refined the body shape, and they've even refined underneath the car. Aerodynamics is basically overcoming the resistance to energy. So the challenge to the designer is to reduce the flow of air around and throughout the car. Even something as simple as getting rid of joints can make a huge difference. The new Passat is made up of an amazing 14,113 separate parts. And by looking at how each part was made and how everything works together, VW have significantly improved the efficiency. Recycling is another way to save resources. The new Passat's bumpers and wheel arch linings are made from recycled materials. And this is one car that'll never end up on the scrap heap, because no less than 75% of it can be recycled. At the end of the day, there is no easy answer. We all want the benefits of individual freedom, but nobody wants to pay more for the privilege, for some long-term benefit to the planet in general. No matter how many car manufacturers come up with new technologies or green vehicles, it won't really make any difference, apart from contributing to the caring image of the marque. Why? Because we're all basically selfish. Why should we opt for a less practical, less powerful car, which costs more as well? Yet how much more pollution and congestion can our world take before we finally realise it's just too late?
Yes, I think some of us will have a lot of explaining to do to our grandchildren in years to come. Well, we'll take a break right now, and then please join us for a detailed look at what has recently been announced as the 1997 European Car of the Year, a result which has mystified some motoring journalists, including our own Mike Rutherford. And in case you don't know which car it is yet, find out after the break and we'll discover Mike's views on it.
What have the following cars got in common? The Jaguar XK8, the Porsche Boxster, the BMW 5 Series, the BMW Z3, the Mercedes SLK. I'll tell you what they've got in common. None of them, not one of them, is as good as this car here. Well, that's not me talking, that's the jury, the 55-man strong jury of journalists who come up with the Car of the Year awards every year. And they've decided that this car, the Renault Megane Scenic, is a better car than all those great cars that I've just mentioned. What's more, it's also a better car than highly credible new cars like the Volkswagen Passat, the Skoda Octavia, the Ford Ka, and the Audi A3. It wiped the floor with those, and it wiped the floor with all those other supercars I've just mentioned to you. It's the Renault Megane Scenic. It's the best car on the road according to the judges, and I can't think why. Well, if you think that the Scenic looks like a cross between a conventional 5-door family hatchback and a mini MPV, a mini people carrier if you like, you're absolutely right, because that's what it is. It's a wacky design, there's nothing else like it. It's the only small MPV on the market, although Renault like to call it an activity car rather than an MPV. And our very own Ginny Buckley caught up with Renault's head of design, who talked her through the new Megane Scenic.
I think that the market is changing dramatically right now, and the days are over of cars where you are hoping to make 3,000 a day and sell 3,000 a day. It's a market which is a market of offer rather than demand, and so therefore you really have to understand your customer. And clearly with the Scenic we have a vehicle which is so different to anything which has been built so far. There's been a craze for MPVs, of course, but they are a little bit too expensive for the average family. And with the Scenic we're offering a new type of car for European families, and I think it's going to go really well.
Are you hoping to open the market up much in the same way as the hatchback did for the 60s?
Absolutely. If I look at the way that the response has been in the first days of sale, we've had more than 7,000 orders, and I think 1,000 of those were before the prices were known. So I think that we are clearly going to open up a new era, and the enthusiasm that we had at the last Paris Motor Show we have never lived anything like that before.
It's quite an exciting time for you.
It is. It is.
The car market is very crowded. Are you confident enough that the niche is there for the Scenic?
Well, I don't think it's a niche. I really think that the future of the automobile is oriented towards the Scenic type of vehicle, and that the ordinary five-door hatch will eventually become a niche segment. I think the industry is going towards this type of vehicle.
One of the many reasons why this car won the 1997 Car of the Year award is its functionality, according to the press release that comes with it. And I guess this is what you could call one of the functional features of this car, this little aircraft style table which collapses every time you lean on it, so I'm not sure how clever it is. But I've got to say, it's a wacky interior, it's very versatile, and that's again another point that wins it the title. But let's look at some of these other things. General design, I mean, what do you think of the general design? All right, it's different, but it only looks like a small people carrier. Nothing more, nothing less. Comfort, well, I'm not particularly comfortable in this car. Safety, well, yeah, it's got a lot of good safety features. But I have to say that when you look at some of the other contenders for the title, things like Mercedes-Benz and Porsches and BMW, what would you rather wrap yourself around in or hit a lamppost in? This car, or a Mercedes, a BM, or a Porsche? We then get on to things like driver satisfaction. Well, I can tell you, having driven things like the Porsche and the BM, you get a lot more satisfaction driving those cars than this one. And then perhaps one of the final things, price, and that's an interesting one. Despite the fact that this is a five-door hatchback car, albeit a very versatile five-door hatchback car, it's going to be costing quite a bit more actually than your conventional five-door hatchback. So you've got to look towards paying something of the order of £13,000 when this car goes on sale. And incidentally, it will go on sale late. It's the 1997 Car of the Year. It's just been announced that in November, but we won't be seeing it in Britain until May. The thing that really puzzles me about this car is that if anybody was going to be enthusiastic about a car like this, it should be somebody like me, a 30-something bloke on a kind of modest to middle income. In other words, you know, a kind of ordinary guy in the street with a couple of kids, which I have, and yet I don't want a car like this, and my kids don't want a car like this. I mean, to say that it's multi-purpose and activity isn't enough for me. It just doesn't have that gotta have it factor. And like I said, I find it quite ironic that I'm the perfect candidate. I should be the sort of bloke getting excited about a car like this because it, in theory, suits my lifestyle and it accommodates my kids, and it's got the versatility and all the things that go with having children. But quite frankly, on a long-term basis, I wouldn't be seen dead in a car like this. And the reason is that it just screams out at people, family man. And I'm not sure when I drive down the street, I want to demonstrate that I'm a family man. And similarly, for women, I'm not sure that when a woman drives a car like this, she wants to scream to the world, yes, I'm dropping off the kids at school, or I'm taking the old man down to the railway station because he's off to the office for the day, or I'm going to meet the girls for coffee morning. And if you drive a car like this, you might as well have a sticker down the side saying that sort of thing, because you are a very particular type of driver if you go for a car like this. You're a family driver. You've got kids, you've got to pick kids up from school, go shopping. Do you traditionally like people carriers?
I don't actually. I think they look a bit ridiculous, but
But why is that? Is that because they say too much about you, you know, that you are a family person and perhaps you don't want to advertise the fact?
Yeah, possibly. And being so high up, I feel like you sort of hog the road a bit.
And maybe feel like driving a minivan rather than a car?
I do a bit, actually.
Can I have a look?
Sure, go ahead. Now, what do you think of that seat fabric and those colours?
Very wild. Very wild, very nice actually. Yes, plenty of legroom.
Would you invest £13,000 worth of your money?
No, I wouldn't.
It's quite compact actually, isn't it? It's a bit shorter than the normal sort of people carriers.
Yeah, it's really the only small people carrier on the market. All these seats come out, they slide around, you can remove them. You could just drive along with one seat in the car, the driver's seat, if you wanted. Does that appeal to you?
Yes. Well, as a mother, and taking them to and from school, it's very convenient.
What about the tables, kids? Have you seen the tables on the back of the chair?
The seats are really child friendly as well because they're easy to clean.
Are they now? That's something I don't know anything about. They look like if you spilt an ice cream or something you'd have problems, but not.
I've got a car with a beige interior and it's a nightmare. That's wonderful. We just borrowed a Dodge Caravan on holiday and the kids like all the little gadgets and all the places to put the cups and things like that, so...
A Dodge Caravan being we call that in this country a Chrysler Voyager. That's what it will be sold as here. That will be probably around £20,000. This is about £13,000. What do you think of that price?
Cheap, really cheap.
You're actually considering buying a Renault Megane, although not necessarily a scenic.
Not necessarily a scenic. No, we're probably looking more at the saloon, I think, rather than the scenic.
Because as you know, this is part of the Megane family. There's about 5 of them. How does this appeal to you, this one?
Well, this one actually looks probably better from our point of view than the saloon because it's larger and we're a tall family basically. Even a 12-year-old's fast approaching 6 foot, so this one would probably be a better model to buy.
Well, I don't quite know what I'm driving when I climb into this thing. I mean, it looks like a conventional car in the sense that it's got 5 traditional seats, although they're not so traditional when you consider that you can remove those seats and play around with them, unlike any other car in this class. But it feels very much, I don't know, almost like a little minibus. I don't like this driving position. I feel perched up here. I feel I'm leaning down to grab the steering wheel, and I don't like that. I don't mind high driving positions as a general rule, but there's something that unnerves me about this. The waistline of the car is very low. I'm up here, I'm peering down. I don't know, I feel like a minibus driver somehow. And how is this little minibus when you're at the wheel? Well, you know, it does everything you would expect it to do. It is a Renault after all, and it's difficult to think of a car manufacturer that's having a better time of it at the moment than Renault, what with their Formula 1 success and their Car of the Year awards. But it's pretty unremarkable, I have to say. I mean, everything's where you'd expect it to be. But you don't climb into this car and say to yourself, wow, this is the best interior I've seen all year. In fact, I don't even climb in this car and say to myself, this is the best interior I've seen all week, because I've seen better. It's functional enough. The heating and ventilation system I didn't find remarkable. I was either too hot or too cold when I was driving up in this car late last night when it was icy and foggy. Performance-wise, well, you wouldn't want a family activity vehicle, and that's what they call this. Not quite sure what activity they're referring to, but that's the official term for this car. It's not a people carrier, it's not an MPV, it's an activity vehicle.
Well, I'm sure you'll make your own mind up about the Renault Megane, and only time will tell if it lives up to its award. Well, Mike Rutherford will be back later chatting to our regular guest Stirling Moss. But now let's feast our eyes on a new Mercedes, the CLK, which will be out here next spring.
Mercedes-Benz have just unveiled its new 4-seat sports coupe, the CLK, which will be for sale in the UK from next summer. Available in 2 design and equipment versions, Elegance and Sport, the new car has a front end which reflects the look of the latest E-Class range. However, the 4 headlamp styling is more steeply raked and has smaller lights than the E-Class. The car features a coupe shape which is midway between the E-Class and C-Class saloons in overall length. Wheelbase and width, though, are identical to the C-Class saloon. Under the bonnet is the all-new 3.2-litre V6 engine, which will also appear next spring in E-Class saloons and estate cars. Also available is the 2.3 supercharged engine from the SLK sports car and the existing Mercedes-Benz 2-litre 4-cylinder unit. Power outputs range from 136 to 220 brake horsepower. The two versions have very different interiors with sports seats for the driver and front passenger and individual rear seats. An innovation is the brake assistant, which gives much shorter stopping distances with emergency braking. Acceleration skid control, or ASR, is standard. The CLK will have plenty of safety features meeting tough 1998 crash test standards and including twin front and door airbags as standard, plus belt force limiters. The CLK complements the larger V8 and V12 powered CL Coupe models in the Mercedes range. Prices have yet to be confirmed, but the car is likely to cost between £25,000 and £35,000.
Ah, snip. Fantastic. And if you've just seen the perfect Christmas present to yourself, better make it an Easter present because it's not out here until the spring. After the break, we'll be hearing from owners of some classic Peugeots. Hi, you're watching Four Wheels Good on the Men and Motors channel. Now, are you totally committed to one make of car? When buying a new vehicle, do you never look outside your own favourite manufacturer's range? Well, if that manufacturer is Peugeot, you're possibly a member of Club Peugeot UK. Peter Baker went along to meet members at a rally in the Midlands.
The Peugeot mark for many people in this country arrived with the 205 hot hatchback. But of course Peugeot have been around since Victorian times, and Club Peugeot UK are a group who celebrate the history of the mark. Not only do their members cherish their discontinued models, try interesting them in a latest model.
My next door neighbour is actually a Peugeot dealer, and every new car that comes out he brings it along to me and says, try this one, Keith. The last one he brought along was the new 406. Which, according to all the road test reports, sets new standards in terms of noise suppression, ride, comfort and handling. I drove it and I liked it. I got back into the 604 and I still like the 604 better.
In 1961 I was doing an apprenticeship at a Ford garage, and I joined the local car club and boy racer in those days, and a friend of mine came in and he said, I've got a Peugeot. And I said, well, have you seen your doctor about it? Because I'd never even heard of it. And it was a Peugeot 403. He took me for a ride. It was the nicest car I've ever driven. It was like a Rolls Royce compared to the Fords at that particular time. 2 days later, I went out and bought one. When I collected it from that particular garage, I agreed to work for them, and I started the next day, and I've been with Peugeot in and around Peugeot ever since 1961.
Nick's brought a 1953 203 today. Just look at the simplicity of the engine. And if you're looking for the spark plugs, they're at the ends of these. But these Peugeots aren't what most people would call classics. Why do they like them so much?
Well, I've got no reason not to like it. It goes. I don't have to do really any maintenance to it, and I drive it every day, and it's brilliant on the snow. Absolutely magic. If it won't go forwards, it'll go backwards in screaming reverse. But yeah, it'll take all the abuse you can fling at it. I don't know, it just sort of became an obsession, really. Once you start, you can't stop. But the club's great because you can, even if it's only once a year, you come out and play motor cars with everybody else and mess about and talk about grommets and things like that.
But do you think it is an obsession, really? Because everyone here is just into the Peugeot mark, almost blinkered to any other make of car.
Well, yes, I'm fascinated by anything European, actually. I quite happily get along with a Trabant or a Sirena. Polish Sirena, that's something that nobody ever come across in this country.
It certainly would be difficult to come across spares like this unless you're around like-minded enthusiasts. And you'll always find a petrolhead who knows what every last bit does.
Well, it's actually got mechanical fuel injection. It's Kugel-Fischer. It was introduced to this car in 1969. They actually fitted it to the 2002 BMW TII. And people would criticise it and say, oh, well, why don't you want today's LE2 Jetronic or Bosch K Jetronic or something like that? But there's only a limit to the things that go wrong with it. The diaphragm might go, for example. And you can go to the scrapyard and just get yourself a second-hand diaphragm. Or the plungers might stick. So these old bolts and gaskets, you take it off and you clean it.
There may be many words that describe Oliver's 104, but clean is not one of them.
Like basically, one ideal way of keeping rot at bay is to keep a little lake of black oil on the floor, and that really stops anything going rusty.
But you'll be glad to know that most people here are not so unconventional. Here's the magnificent 404.
I've always fancied the shape of it, and I decided to buy one, so I went and found one, and that was it, really.
What sort of year is it from?
It's 1972. It's done 61,000 miles from new. That's the original mileage. It's been restored by the previous owner that I got it from. It just needs a few bits finishing off on it here and there, some of which I've done, some of which I've yet to do.
Now, when you see the reps going up and down the motorways in their Mondeos and Vectras and all that, how do you feel?
Different.
Do you feel smug that you're in something a little bit different?
I don't feel smug. It's just nice to be slightly different. It's a personal thing. I'm not really worried what they think. It's just nice to be driving something I like.
But they've got, you know, side impact beams and airbags and super stereo systems. You're not worried about that?
Not particularly. I think this would make quite a big hole in a Vectra or a Mondeo.
Chair. In some respects, you could say it's a Ferrari-shaped car run on a Peugeot shoestring.
Now, this F, just tell us what this badge means. It means it's actually made by the people in Italy, is it?
Yeah, the car was made in Turin in Italy, and it was designed by Pininfarina. And the F stands for Farina, and Pinin was the nickname of the guy. He called him Baby. Baby Farina.
Now, this car's had quite a few changes to it since it was first made.
It has indeed, it has.
Tell me about it.
It's been diesel and turned up from diesel to petrol because the diesel engine was going to cost so much more than the value of the vehicle, obviously. And we did converted it to petrol, 1.6 GT 305 engine. And that went nice and smooth. And we did have to go with it broad, so we thought it would be a good idea to change it from right to left and drive.
So you did?
So we did indeed.
Let's have a look. So, I don't believe it.
Yes, you do indeed, look.
Oh my goodness me.
There you are,
well,
right to left.
I know some people put it on the roof rack for holidays, but you actually changed the steering wheel.
We have indeed, yes.
So the engine's changed, the steering's changed. You're going to tell me the colour's changed as well.
And now the colour is the same one, but it's been completely resprayed and restored.
Now, I know your club is open not just to people who have got magnificent old ones, but also to current production models. Why is this?
When originally we started the club in '81, we were all rank amateurs at this kind of business, and the people that came mostly owned older cars, by which I mean cars of the 50s, but they also own new cars, and they felt, and I think it's generally been accepted since, that it's a shame to exclude people who have an interest in Peugeot, because the modern car of today is maybe tomorrow's classic.
So don't feel that Club Peugeot UK is just for nostalgia addicts. If you're a proud owner of a new 406, say, just think in 25 years' time, we could be talking to you at a rally about how good it was in its day and how the new Peugeots of the year 2021 were not quite the same.
Some lovely images there. We'll be covering other owners' clubs in future weeks here on Four Wheels Good, so keep watching. It's time to join Mike Rutherford in conversation with legendary race ace Stirling Moss now. The subject this week, what exactly has the world of motor racing actually given the everyday motorist?
I think we should acknowledge that a lot of what goes on in Formula One is transferred down to ordinary road cars. Braking systems, for example. I think a lot of people would be surprised if they climbed into a car from the 60s or 70s. The lack of braking on those cars compared to today's cars is enormous.
Oh, sure. I mean, with the advent, the disc brakes, of course, came in with Jaguar in the early 50s, and there was a tremendous amount of development of that with which I was connected, and I know how many failures we had. Failures which were, thank God, eradicated because of in motorsport you do things very quickly, and they were developed, of course, very well, and shock absorbers all greatly improved because of motor racing, and I mean, there's so many things. I mean, aerodynamic devices now that help hold the cars down. A lot of those are being tried out in racing.
Would you advise parents out there who've got younger kids? I mean, we've talked about the problems with older drivers. Let's not forget that another very, very vulnerable group, arguably the most vulnerable, are younger drivers up to the age of about 25, who, you know, it seems to me that incredible that we allow a young kid to go out on a Tuesday afternoon, shortly after his 17th birthday, allegedly pass his driving test and then go out on his own. He can drive on roads he's never driven on. You know, sure. I mean, shouldn't these guys, if the government isn't going to force these people to train properly, shouldn't parents be saying to their kids, come on, we're going to invest a little bit more money and give you some advanced driving courses?
But parents, I think, nowadays do not have that much control. I mean, we're now not allowed to hit our children, or we can find ourselves in court for that. And I personally hope that my son, a little bit later, I may send him to a racing driver's school, not because I want him to race, because I want him to feel what a car will do, the potential of the car, and then begin to realise, my gosh, this is something that is quite a dangerous tool.
Yeah.
And I think in places in America, I'm sure they have driver education in the schools, and I think perhaps we ought to have it over here.
Yeah, I mean, it seems to me that things like learning to swim, learning a bit of first aid, learning to drive are sort of essential requirements.
Because the more you know about driving, the more you can you understand what it's like to be a pedestrian, or at least what the driver's problem is if you're a pedestrian, I should say.
And didn't you also tell me a few years ago that if you do teach a kid who's not academically brilliant to at least drive a car or a van, I mean, that actually gives him something to go out into the job market in. If you think of,
I'm thinking of that for my son as well, actually.
I think your son's going to be driving a Formula 1 car one day. We're running out of time, Stirling, but another bugbear of yours is that the planners out there, the so-called planners, these road engineers, the people who decide...
You mean the people who are given a can of paint and told to make the double yellow lines or the single yellows, or the dots?
Or put the bus stop up, opposite another bus stop or something like that.
I mean, it is amazing to me there's no control over councils, because I know one place in London, which some people will know, where you're coming up over a railway bridge and there's a bus stop on this side and a bus stop on the other side, on the downhill bit. So therefore there's a bus parked here you have to pull out. Same with the other guy. I mean, it's so dangerous. I've written to the council, they take no notice. And it seems that they put bus stops wherever they feel they want to put them, without any thought of other road users.
Probably the qualification you need for a job like that is that you've never driven a car, a bus, a truck, a bike in your life.
Yeah.
Because had they done that, they wouldn't put the things where they put them.
We did have a Minister of Transport, remember, Barbara Castle, she couldn't drive, so I suppose one doesn't need this qualifications.
Well, I've checked this with my lawyer, and I think I'm right in saying, in fact, I'm 100% certain that the current Transport Minister, God bless him, is a former drink driver. Here's a man that's telling us that we shouldn't drink and drive, and Sir George is a former convicted drink driver. I mean, what sort of example does that set to us?
It's a bad example, but he's in a good position to tell you. I mean, he used to do it, and hopefully he now realises it's something, because I think it's terrible to drink drive. I think it's absolutely right, they shouldn't. And maybe he now realises the bad things of his ways and is up there crusading against it. I hope.
The phrase, one should practice what one preaches, springs to mind, but we'll save that for another day. The other thing we're going to talk about in future weeks is your relationship with the police. Now, when was the last time that you were pulled over by the police? What for? And what did they say to you?
Well, it was a few years ago actually, and a cop pulled me up and said, who do you think you are, Stirling Moss? And I had to say, yes I am actually.
And Stirling will be joining us regularly again in the new year. For the next 4 weeks, we'll be highlighting the best of motoring for 1997. Next week, we'll have a classic car special with coverage of the recent major auction in Buxton and further coverage of this year's NEC Classic Motor Show. Over Christmas, we present a USA special, monster machines, gas guzzlers, outrageous motoring lifestyles, and a day with a Californian highway patrol. Then we welcome in the new year with in-depth reports on the cars which will dominate 1997. All that in the next month. Well, after the break, we'll have a look at 2 models that may be on your shopping list. Stay with us. Welcome back. Now let's look at 2 current contenders in the family car market, including the new Vauxhall Vectra Estate.
Vauxhall are now offering us for the first time in nearly 10 years a family-sized estate. This new version of the Vectra is competing with the Mondeo, Laguna and Zandia estates, as well as the new Peugeot 406 estate, which will be out next year. Due to a lukewarm reception the Vectra received at its launch about a year ago, the estate version sees the addition of a couple of features that surprisingly weren't included from the outset. The adjustable steering wheel means no more squashed knees, though headroom is still fairly tight for taller people, while the third rear passenger gains a 3-point seatbelt. But the main mechanical change involves the rear suspension, which has been stiffened to cope with the heavy loads an estate is expected to handle, while the improved level of stiffness in the body means that the Vectra doesn't shake to the extent of some of its rivals. Looks-wise, the estate fits into the typical Vectra category, not as charismatic as the Audi A4 Avant, but maybe more elegant than the Ford Mondeo, with only the standard roof rails distinguishing it as an estate from the front. Inside, Vauxhall decided to place style above space and practicality. The load area of 1,490 litres with seats down still puts the Vectra behind the real load luggers, say Mondeo, Laguna and Xantia, although it is pleasantly free from any major wheel arch intrusion. With a 0 to 60 speed of 9.3 seconds, its quick yet economical Ecotec engine and general improvements in handling, the Vectra is at least competitively pacey. Yet, as before, it's best on motorways, whilst on other surfaces the chassis merely copes rather than deals with the road. With the choice between the 1.8 and 2-litre, 2.5 V6 and 2-litre TDI, it seems that Vauxhall conservatism has prevailed yet again, as despite the many improvements, the Vectra estate does fail to keep up with the class leaders. The original Primera was a decent car, mainly let down by its nondescript looks. And now Nissan have given us the all-new Primera, but you have to be a car spotter or Nissan salesperson in order to tell them apart. The look of the new model is rather unimaginative, with Nissan pandering to the conservative buyer and the notoriously unadventurous fleet market, as it looks pretty much like the old model. But there's little of the subtle blending of lines that make the new Peugeot 406 and Ford Mondeo so attractive. The interior is also devoid of any luster. Comfortable and functional, yes, but it isn't really interesting to look at. But the new Primera is a damn good drive and gives a refined ride. The steering is quick and accurate, and the suspension setup, which is taken from the front of the old Primera, and the rear multi-link beam seen on the QX and Almera, ensures a smooth ride even over mid-bend bumps. The gear change is generally precise, but the car manages to feel smaller, lighter and more nimble than it actually is, and its handling does inspire confidence. The engines are either competitive or ahead of the competition, providing a smooth ride with a fuel economy so good it makes similar cars in its class, like the Mondeo and 406, look needlessly thirsty. At a base price of around £12,000, and all the necessary equipment like anti-lock brakes, good quality alarm, radio cassette, standard drivers and optional passenger's airbag, together with Nissan's excellent warranty and manufacturing reputation, this car is a sensible buy. But it's a shame that so few private buyers will ever discover what a fine driver's machine the new Primera is. In a market where looks and pride in ownership play such an important role, it's rather doubtful that the Primera has what it takes to compete with the new Mondeo and Peugeot 406.
Well, the details and photos of those cars are on this shiny disc, along with over 1,000 other car manufacturers. Philip Deacon and Marcus Dyson are on the team set up to produce the biggest, most definitive reference work on the world motor industry. And this CD-ROM is due to be launched next spring. Welcome to both of you. If I could start with you, Marcus, first. What was your initial brief for this project and how did you go about setting it up?
The disc was inspired by books like the old Daily Express Year of the Car book, the Guinness Book of World Cars, and I thought it would be nice to get that information updated into a modern format you could look at on your computer and get all of the information into one place.
There's an enormous amount of information on this disc, isn't there?
That's the advantage of CD-ROM.
What do you think is the biggest advantage then, would you say, of having this kind of information on this kind of format?
You get pictures on there, you can get video, you can get animations that have got subtitles to show how things work. It's much more pictorial, it's much more interactive.
Well, we're looking at some the pictorial images of the CD-ROM now. That's an Aston Martin there, I recognise, I think.
Yep, that's right.
So I suppose the advantage is over the likes of books and other literature is that you can cross-reference between the model, the specification, and then find the car club, perhaps people historically linked with the vehicle in very quick succession.
Absolutely.
So I know that this hasn't been a solo effort, guys. I mean, you've had some help with this. If it was a solo effort, certainly you'd be very old by the time you finished it. What kind of organisations, Philip, have helped out with the project?
Well, obviously all the current manufacturers.
and organisations such as the Motor Industry Archives and the Society of Motor Manufacturers and Traders. Also we've worked with organisations such as Transport 2000 and Greenpeace, because obviously we've touched upon the environmental issues of the car.
Sure.
And car clubs is one of the main areas.
I know there was something like, you claimed 2,500 car clubs. That must have been quite some task to track them down. How did you go about that?
Well, two members of the staff who are actually working come from a club base, and we tracked them down through various sources. One help was actually the internet, magazines, and even car clubs themselves. Like I said, we're in touch with 2,500, and that's something like even 800 in New Zealand, believe it or not.
Right.
New Zealand and Australia. Enormous amount of information and obviously interest from car clubs in this product.
Is this idea going to be computer, I mean, are we looking at people who are involved with computers, or is it going to be sort of idiot-proof?
We've tried our best to make it idiot-proof. We're actually a games company primarily, and we've tried to bring that to the product.
So it's going to be fun, as opposed to someone sitting in front of a computer for hours. It's going to be a fun product to use.
Absolutely, and there's even a game on the disc as well.
There's obviously a colossal amount of information here. The obvious question, I suppose, is who is going to buy it?
Well, obviously car enthusiasts, but it's got various other features. You know, anybody who's interested in cars, it's got the new cars, the classics, and it's got the games, the people. We've got various sections. We've got lots of interesting sections.
Do you think will it be exclusively for car nuts and trivia collectors, or do you think it might really provide a service to the industry itself?
I think it will be a service with the sort of feedback from the motor manufacturers themselves, who are ringing us, giving us information, helping us out, so the accuracy is 100%.
I suppose we really need to know, how much is it going to cost?
It's just going to be £30.
£30?
Yep.
Sounds like good value to me. Well, thanks very much for joining us, and good luck with the project, guys. That's about all we have time for Four Wheels Good this week. Watch out for our specials we have over the next 4 weeks, including our dedicated classic car programme next week. Our regular style magazine format returns early in the new year, so from all the team here, have a great festive period, and if you're going out for a drink, leave the car at home. Enjoy yourselves though. We'll see you very soon. Goodbye.